Well, good morning, and welcome to Nashville. How many of you are from Nashville? I don't know the room very well. How many of you are from Nashville area? You're here. How many are from Tennessee? You're in Tennessee. A few of you. I see those hands. Who's the farthest away? Got California in the room? We got California in there. Awesome. We got the Northeast in the room. Northeast. What is that? Pittsburgh. Wow. Go Cowboys. Sorry. Sorry. So we got all kinds of people in the room, and I'm just thrilled to be here. And sometimes speaker experts say, don't say that you're glad to be there. They all know you're glad to be there. But I was at a Stephen Curtis Chapman concert the other night, and I don't know if you know him, but he's 62 years old, and he's got over 50 number one hits. He's sold $17 gazillion worth of whatever. And he stood up there and he said, every time that people come into a room to hear me sing, I'm absolutely amazed. I'm grateful for the goodness of God to let me do this. And so I think if we ever get a little presumptuous, the Lord maybe just will set us aside. So I am grateful. I'm grateful for you. I love pastors. I've pastored churches for 28 years until about 3 years ago. I still pastor, and I'm a transitional pastor currently and loving that work. But I've pastored local churches for 28 years up until 2021 when we began Everyone's Wilson or the Everyone's Welcome Network. And so I'll try to talk a little bit about that today. But I really want to begin with a question. If God built a city, what kind of city would He build? God built a community, what kind of community would He build? And you say, well, I thought the Lord was in a part of redeeming souls and getting people saved and moving us from death to life, and certainly that is true. But if you read the Bible, you'll find that there's a pretty robust theology of place. It goes all the way back to Genesis, where God put Adam and Eve in a garden, said, here's where I want you to fulfill the creation mandate. And that is in the Garden of Eden. I want you to be fruitful and multiply. I want you to tend the earth. I want you to till the soil and take care of what I've given to you. Where they were, their place was really important. You can fast forward that, and we won't do this all day, but you can fast forward a little bit. And Jesus even said, listen, I go to prepare a place for you. We can read in Revelation 21 a little glimpse of what that place might look like. And we begin to think about what is it that God is trying to do as He is redeeming a people for Himself. He's doing it in a place. Some of us are from Tennessee, and if you're from Tennessee, there's certain things that don't translate as well when you move to California, or if you move to California, or if you're from California and you move to Tennessee, like most Californians are doing. You'll find that not everything translates exactly from place to place. Your place is really important. It determines the people you meet. It determines the culture that you adopt. It determines the way that you think about the world. It determines a lot of things. And so our place is really important. So when we think about reaching our community, thinking about who our community is and the place that we're creating. I know for me, I grew up in Tullahoma, Tennessee, about an hour and 15 minutes south of here, and a very middle class kind of situation. We didn't lack anything, but I think I remember going on 2 vacations in my life. Well, we didn't have a lot of extra, but it was a wonderful home. My parents loved Jesus, loved me, loved my brother. My dad was a deacon and church treasurer for all of my life until just a few years ago. He kind of retired out of that finally, and my mom was a church clerk. We're church people. I love the local church. When I walk into a church, and this is true, you can smell the must in the carpet. It's been there for 50 years. The asbestos that's in the ceiling, it's like an aroma in my heart. I love the local church. And but that was kind of embedded in me from watching my mom and dad love the local church. The place, the family that we're born into determines so much. And so the kind of community that we're building really is very important. You say, well, I don't know that we're into city building, Daryl. Well, I understand that, but I know where you want to live. I know you want to live in a place that's safe. I know you want to live in a place that's clean. I know that you want your kids to have access to good education. I know that you want to be able to buy what you need and provide for what your family needs. I know what kind of place you want to live in. This place is really important. So if God were going to build a city, what kind of city would He build? As I mentioned in Revelation 21, we can see a picture of that, but we can also see a picture of that in Isaiah chapter 65, beginning in verse 17. I won't go there today. You can write it down, and I think it may be in your notes in that Venn diagram maybe that's in front of you, but we can kind of summarize that. I'm not going to go into all the hermeneutics of that this morning, but we can see 5 kind of identifiers of what a thriving city would look like or what a thriving community would look like. First, you have thriving souls. People are happy in the Lord. We would say in New Testament terminology, people are Christians. They're finding their delight in the Lord, and they've come to know Jesus, and they're walking with Him, and they're delighting in the Lord, and worship is a part of their life. You'd find thriving families where the youngest among us and the oldest among us are honored. That there's a value placed on every member of the family, no matter who they are and what they look like. You'll find thriving youth, that the next generation has the opportunity to be successful. You'll find thriving economies. I talk to chambers of commerce from time to time and business people all the time, and I'm telling you, I say, listen, I want you to make a lot of money. They said, I know you want to make me make a lot of money. I know you want me to make a lot of money because then I can give you some of it. Say, well, you can do that, but that's not the reason I want you to make a lot of money. When you're making a lot of money, you're at least demonstrating that you're adding value back to the community. And when you're adding value back to the community, that means that more people can have employment. More people can have a roof over their head. More people can live the life that God called them to live while they're on this earth. We need thriving communities. In Isaiah 65, we see where agriculture, there was reaping, or there was sowing and there was reaping. Thriving economies are a mark of a great community. And then thriving neighborhoods. People are watching out for each other. You know one another. You're familiar with one another. You're available to one another. Interestingly enough, a Harvard study on human flourishing found these traits are some very similar to them in their study as they looked at what a healthy community really looks like. And so, if God built a city, what kind of city would He build? And so to kind of illustrate this, a few years ago, we began to ask that question, and we found ourselves in Jeremiah 29. I was still pastoring a local church there in Mount Juliet, and we found ourselves in Jeremiah 29, and the people of Israel, they did not want to be in Babylon. You can appreciate that. They wanted to be back in Jerusalem, their home. You ever been homesick? Because that's your place. That's where that's your people. They wanted to be back in their place. And Jeremiah wrote them back from Jerusalem and said, listen, I know you want to come home, but most of you will never see Jerusalem again. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to plant your life in the city in which I've placed you. I want you to build houses, get out of those tents. I want you to plant crops because you're going to be there a while to harvest those crops. Those vineyards are going to come to fruition. I want you to plant your life there. I want you to be a part of the ecosystem of that community. Because when they thrive, you thrive, to my point earlier about economics, right? And other things. He also said, I want you to seek the shalom, the peace, the prosperity of the city. The word shalom, we use that a lot, translated peace, right? It really means wholeness, bringing back the broken pieces back together. I want you to seek the wholeness of the community. Now, these were Israel's enemies, but their neighbors weren't, they were just people. He said, I want you to seek the shalom of this people in which you're held captive. And then finally, I want you to pray for the peace. I want you to pray for the city in which you live. It's overwhelming for me to think about. It's hard for me to put myself in their position. They wanted to be home. They were victims of political and military, takeover. And yet, the prophet of God said, I want you to plant your life right there. And I'm going to see to it that you thrive there because the people around you that you're serving, they'll thrive and you'll thrive with them. And so over the last few years, we've developed a framework that's helped us kind of get our arms around what it means to mobilize the church into the public space. And I've already done that, but this framework is not mine. It's not original with me. I'm part of around a lot of great, smart people that helped us develop some of this. But in the middle of that Venn diagram, and we won't spend a lot of time here, but is where transformed lives and transformed communities are found. And it's really wrapped around these four greats that were the great commandment to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. The great commission to make disciples of all the nations. The great compassion of Matthew 25, as unto the least of these, you've done it to me. Can you imagine that Jesus, the God of all eternity, the God-man, he said, as much as you've treated the most vulnerable around you, that's how you've treated me. I know you've come to church. I know you tithe your money. I know you serve on the board. I know you do all that. But the way that you treat these folks that are most vulnerable, that's how you're treating me. And then finally in John 17 is the great collaboration where Jesus prayed on the night before he would give himself up for the ransom for us all. He prayed that we would be one as he and the Father are one. Could I have a volunteer that could explain the Trinity for me? Just anybody got that under? Yeah. It's pretty grand, right? Mysterious, glorious. He said, just as you and I, the Father and I are one, I want my disciples to be like that. Grand and glorious and mysterious, filled with wonder and awe. That their unity would be a megaphone for the good news of the gospel. Their unity would be a validation and an announcement that it's true that I have come to die as a substitute sacrifice for the sins of the world. Our unity is not a extracurricular activity. If you're a pastor, your unity with other churches is not a side hustle. It seems to be foundational to our gospel mandate to make Jesus known in our communities. So if God built a city, what kind of city would he build? So this is a framework we've kind of tried to build our work around. And the question is, what can one church do? Well, I know we have a lot of smart theologians in the room, and when Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, or to the church at Colossae, or the church at Philippi, he wasn't writing to just an individual congregation meeting in that city. He was writing to the church of the city, the church of Ephesus, the church of Colossae. When he fusses at the Corinthian church, he's not just fussing about local congregational division. He's saying, listen, the church of the city, when Jesus, in Revelation, we read about the letters to the seven churches. He's grieved over these churches. If you were to write a letter to your community, to the church in your community, what would that letter look like? That's a good exercise, by the way. These things are wonderful. These things are good, but I have this against you. What would that look like in your own community? You see, one church can do a lot, but one church cannot reach the community for Christ. One church doesn't have capacity to do that. One congregation doesn't have capacity to do that. A lot of times we think about reaching the community, and really we're only perfectly positioned to reach the part of the community that we're currently reaching. We talk about reaching the community, we're really only talking about loving the people from the community that are actually coming to our church currently. Because we don't really have capacity to turn the community upside down. Only the unified church of the Lord Jesus can do that. I was talking in a pastor's meeting last week, and the pastor of it's the largest congregation in Wilson County. He's a great guy and humble guy and great church, all the things. But he said, Daryl, when we talk about being a part of everyone's Wilson, and we talk about everyone fed and free and safe and ready, when we start to talk about those things and everyone whole, we know that we don't have capacity to do all of that. We're talking about it in a context of the greater church of Wilson County, that we're a part of something that's much bigger. He said we may be able to adopt 2 schools max. We may be able to feed a few hundred kids in a year max. But we can't see everyone fed and everyone free from addiction and everyone safe and having a foster family if they need one and rescued from human trafficking. We can't do all that. We can't see everyone saved. We don't have capacity to see lostness destroyed in our community. He said, but we We're a part of something bigger than that. And so it's the power of network that allows us to be a part of something great in our community. And so networks are important. And so I would just encourage you, if you're a local pastor, and of course you're here, so we may be preaching to the choir, but the power of network's really important, that you and other pastors in your community know each other. A friend of mine a long time ago said, Daryl, if you'll get to know, you'll learn to like, and you'll grow to love deeply the other pastors in your community, God can do an amazing work through your churches. You can also build network in other domains in your community. We've talked about the public sector and business. Do you know that there's a lot of things going on in your community, and people care about a lot of things going on in your community, and they're not motivated necessarily by Jesus or the church or anything, but they still care about their community? Some of them are sitting in your pews and they are motivated by the gospel, and they're working every day in other domains like business and education and healthcare and arts and entertainment and nonprofit space and all the rest. I had a friend, a pastor friend, in another time and location. He wanted to reach marketplace leaders, and he got up this program in his church and did all these things to reach business leaders. And I asked him, I said, hey, have you ever been to a Chamber of Commerce meeting? You know, they've been doing this a minute. He said, no, I hadn't. Have you been to a business networking meeting, like a BNI or whatever? No, I've never been to that. You know, there's a lot of work going on in your community already. Sometimes folks that are out there doing that work every day, they're wondering where we're at. Because what they mainly hear from us is that they would like for them to come to our church. We do want them to come to our church. But that's all they hear from us. And they're not sure why we're asking for money and not paying any taxes on it. They're just not sure how all that adds up, because they're out there busting their tail, trying to, in the schools, trying to feed kids so that they can be ready to learn when they get there. And they're not really sure if we love them or not, because we're just asking them to come and be a part of our stuff. Jesus asked blind Bartimaeus, what do you want? And blind Bartimaeus said, I'd like to join your discipleship group. He didn't say that. He said, I'd like to see. And Jesus said, I can do that. When we build network with other people that are not in our church, and we ask them, how can we help you be successful? Something amazing happens. Something unbelievable happens. Trust happens. So we build networks, we build relationships, because trust is the currency of transformation. Trust is the currency of transformation. Do you know what a rainbow vacuum cleaner is? Yeah, so I had a friend say, hey, can I come over? I got this rainbow vacuum cleaner. I want you to... And that guy could have stood at my door and told me all the benefits of a rainbow vacuum cleaner. But he didn't do that. He came in the building. He came in the house. And he demonstrated the value of that vacuum cleaner. And he took stuff out of my carpet that I didn't know was there. And that the 3M laboratories would have a hard time identifying. Probably I was raising kids at the time. I don't know what was in there. But it ended up in his little bucket. And I could see it. I could see it. Now, I didn't have any money to buy the vacuum cleaner. And I told him that up front. I had 3 kids. I didn't have any money to buy the vacuum cleaner. We're just going to have to love the dirt. But him showing me was a lot different than him telling me. Networks are important not because they're handy or convenient, but trust takes a minute to build. And we're past the time now that we throw up a church sign and people say, I can trust those people. We don't have any kind of social capital any longer that allows us to do that. And maybe we presumed on it to such an extent we're finding ourselves now surrounded by 80% of our neighbors. In Tennessee, in every county in Tennessee, 80% of our neighbors are not connected to Christ or a church. I was talking to a denominational leader the other day, a different denominational leader, and he said, whatever we've been doing, it's not working. We've got to find a way to be found faithful. So next I'd ask you, how would you pray for your community? How do you pray for your community? And do you have a shared language among those pastors that you know, among those community leaders, those Jesus-loving Chamber of Commerce folks and those Jesus-loving educators? Is there a shared language in your community? Now, you've shared it because you've created a network. You've gotten coffee together and you've shared meals together and you've prayed and wept together. But do you have a shared language of hope that is rallying your community together to pray for your neighbors, those 80% that are not connected to Christ or a church? Is there a shared language that motivates you? For us, we got together with some Chamber of Commerce folk, or at the Chamber of Commerce, we gathered all the kind of the who's who in Wilson County. This is in 2018. We had no idea what we were doing, except that we wanted to get people together, and we said, listen, if we could wave a magic wand, and that wasn't very biblical. We've repented of that since then. So if we could wave Aaron's rod or whatever, if we could do that and fix anything in the community, what would we need to fix? Well, we can't promise anything, but what? And so over 2 meetings, 6 weeks' time, lots of survey work, we came up with 4. They identified 4 pockets of vulnerability for us: hunger, addiction, safety, and education. Now we live in the second wealthiest county in Tennessee. It's a distant second to Williamson, which is the wealthiest county in the universe, but not quite, but close. And so we're a distant second, but we found out that 1 in 4 of our public school kids qualify for free and reduced lunch. They live in a poverty space. When Christmas Day gets here, they're not loving it. They don't have enough food, enough attention, enough anything. So anyway, hunger, addiction, safety, and education. This is pre-COVID. Everybody was talking about opioids and all that. Opioids is still an epidemic. We just don't talk about it anymore. So we came up with a vernacular that we want to see everyone fed, everyone free, everyone safe, and everyone ready. We want to see everyone whole in Christ. We want to see shalom in every family, in every community, every neighborhood. And so that's our shared language. And so we pray around that, and we pray for that together. But let me ask you this. When you look at your city, what do you feel? When you consider your community, what is it that you feel? Sometimes we pray for our community because we want more of our community to come to our church. And I want more of your community to come to your church. Nothing wrong with wanting more of your community coming to your church. But that's not what I'm asking. When you look at the condition of your community, what do you feel? What moves you? What says this is not acceptable? For me, 1 in 4 public school students going to bed hungry tonight in the second wealthiest county in Tennessee is simply not an acceptable way to live. For me to know that 80% of my neighbors are not connected to Christ or a church is no way for us to live. Breaks my heart. When God looked at Nineveh, He saw something different than what Jonah saw when he looked at Nineveh. So it's probably important that we ask ourselves, do we have the heart of God for our community? Jesus looked at Jerusalem and He said, oh, how I could just wrap you up. He was so grieved over the condition of the city. What is it that moves your heart? What is it that leads you to weep? I know you need your church to grow. I know you want to meet all your metrics. Do you know that no personnel committee ever asked me, in 28 years of ministry, are there fewer lost people in our community this year than last year? Their question is, do we have more baptisms this year than last year? And in my tradition, most of us get baptized twice. You know, at 7 and then 11 and then 18 or whatever. And we just keep counting them. We don't like deduct and go back and adjust the numbers. So we baptized millions. But nobody ever asked me if we moved the needle in lostness. No personnel committee ever asked me if there are fewer kids that need a foster home this year than there were last year. No personnel committee ever asked me that. The scorecard is all internal metrics for most of us pastors. So we're just suggesting that you expand the scorecard a little bit. And that the survival and thriving of your church is not the only thing that's important to us. But that maybe the condition of our city, because your church, this is so humbling, your church can get better as your community declines. Your stats, your internal numbers can go up. You can get a little bump in pay raise, and everybody can be happy, and Christmas party's more fun. Everybody can, all the metrics can look good while lostness declines. What if we started scaling it? Say, let's consider our internal numbers against the external population growth of our community. And let's see how we're doing as a church, as an association, as a denomination. And let's just make facts our friends. And then let's make adjustments to do what God's called us to do. Am I getting a little preachy? I got a little preachy there. All right. So who is the community? That's a really good question. Who is your community? A lot of us think we know the community, so we just encourage you, and our work, we try to help you exegete your community to find out who is actually there. We know who we know, right? I mean, I pastored for 28 years. I never knew there was anything called a health council in every county in Tennessee. I didn't know those existed. They're not all robust or whatever, but I didn't even know they existed. Do you know there's health councils and there's local public health officers and so on that are, doing stuff every day, mental health subcommittees. There's all kinds of things happening in your community every day among demographics that we just are never connected to. And so I know you've been doing some things at denomination. Appreciate Eddie's leadership on that as you think about data dashboards and just really understanding that. Here, one tool that's helped us, or we're encouraging churches, and we're just trying to step into it, is to have conversations with people. We have a tool called 100 Conversations. You say, Daryl, I can't have 100 conversations. Well, first of all, you probably could in a year. You could have a couple of cups of coffee a week with some people, but we don't ask you to do that. If you can find 10 people, 10 other pastors, 9 other pastors or church leaders or community leaders that love Jesus and would help you kind of exegete your community and have a sit down, 10 of you could have 10 conversations over the course of 5 or 6 months, and you could then compile and come back and say, where are we? And you could, for us it was hunger, addiction, safety, and education, but you would find some other things in your community, that some pockets of vulnerability and some demographics that are really important. I was talking to Ryan earlier, and some of you have done that work and found out, hey, maybe children's ministry stuff's not great because we're a bunch of old people around here. You can start to figure some of that stuff out. But it also helps you to answer this. This is a cool question for me. I didn't come up with it, but what's wanting to happen in your community? I know what you want as a church leader to see in your church, but what is... Henry Blackaby, I don't know if you know that name, but he was very formative in my life 30 years ago, and he would say stuff like, God is already working around you. Find out what God is already doing in your community, and just join Him there. When you start to have 100 conversations, and you hear from the director of schools that 1 in 4 kids live in a poverty space. That changes the way that we think about our community. I thought we were pretty wealthy, well-to-do people. And we are in some pockets, but we have pockets of vulnerability in our community that are being overlooked, except by the people who can't overlook them. But those people don't have the resources to fix the problem. They're putting their finger in the dike every day, just trying to hold back the tsunami of poverty and brokenness in our communities that we have an answer for. Yet we're in silos, separated from our educators and our social sector people and our public sector people. They're out there trying because they got kids coming to school every day that are just not ready to learn, but they got to move them through. And so they've got boxes of cereal in their desk drawer just to help Johnny get through the class. We've got hope and we've got help. I think it was Truett Cathy, but I think he stole it from Frederick Douglass, who said, it's easier to mentor boys than to mend men. If we will think about our church coming alongside our community and going upstream and getting involved in the lives of kids and their young families early, then maybe we could, I used to say we'd put food pantries out of business, and then the food pantry people didn't appreciate that. But I do want to reduce the urgency of their work. I do want to kill that evil in our communities. So anyway, I need to move along, but what's wanting to happen? And then what is God already doing? And I've alluded to this already, but what is God already doing in your community? For every problem in your community that you see, in your exegeting of the community, everything that you discover, there's already somebody in that space working on that. I want you to find them. I want you to ask them questions. Don't come to them with solutions. Don't come to them with a new program. I'll talk about that in a moment. But just listen to them. Find out what's already happening in your community. And yes, for the love of God, and maybe this is the reason you came to this conference. I don't know. Do not, for whatever you do not start a new program. Your church people are tired of new programs. Your community can't handle another new program. Why don't you, instead of starting a new program, find out what God is already doing in the community and move human and financial resources and spiritual prayer resources? Why don't you just move into that space and help blind Bartimaeus be successful? And you may not get credit for it. You may not be able to tell your personnel committee, hey, you may not get butts in your pew. Can I say? You may not get people in your church. Sorry. You may not get people in your church. There may not be a direct line from that to your church pew right away. But your church folks, your congregation are going to start to see that their work every day in the public space matters. That what God has gifted to them as business people and as educators, as healthcare professionals, as technology geeks, what God has gifted them and called them to do has as much value as anything that we do on a Sunday morning, because they get to be a part of solutions that are so needed in the community, and they get to be the literal hands and feet of Jesus and represent Him and show and tell the gospel, build relationships. I was talking to a lady yesterday. She's in Watertown, Tennessee. Anybody been to Watertown? Oh, I see that. Yeah, the big megapolis of Watertown. So I'm sitting in the coffee shop in Watertown, and she's become a new, we have 28 school partnerships in Wilson County, and about 50 churches are part of those. And her church is stepping in for the first time, and this is a new school online for us. And I walked in, and she was just getting off the phone. She said, I got number 11. Number 11, my 11th volunteer. And so they're going to start a reading program at that elementary school in January. We're going to train them and all the things. And so we're talking, and she's excited about that. We're excited about that. Watertown's a small community, and small communities are wonderful, but, I'm not from there, so that's a problem. And so all that. She's from there. Her husband's from there. They're faithful. Just all the things. God has just done such a good work. And I'm talking to her, and she says she's excited about the reading program, and for all these reasons, I said, hey, I want you to know something too. When you talk to your 11 volunteers, and we'll train them and all that, but I said, if they'll keep showing up every week, helping those students be successful, and building relationships and letting those students know that somebody believes in them, and doing all the things that they're asked to do in that school, those educators are going to pay attention. They're going to see your faith. They know you're from the church. They know why you're there. And when their husband files divorce papers on them, when their doctor gives them a diagnosis they weren't expecting, when their prodigal doesn't seem to be coming back, they're going to say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Because you've built trust. You've helped blind Bartimaeus see. And they see that you're as open-handed and as gracious to them as God has been gracious to you. And you're going to have opportunities that will flood you for gospel proclamation and impact. You'll have the trust that you need to start programs like Good News Clubs, FCA, or whatever it may be. And the floodgates of opportunity will open because you have been found faithful in the small things. Because you've come alongside educators and you've paid attention to what God is doing. And you've leveraged your influence and giving your people away, if that's the right terminology, and unleashed them to do something that your church may never get credit for, but that will advance the kingdom. All right. So don't start a new program. There's plenty of them already in motion. Just fill them. And they're looking for help. All right. How do you intend to reach the community? This is really about systems. You need some sending systems in your church. All this sounds, I hope, great and inspiring. But we have systems for gathering in most churches. Every church has systems for gathering. Matter of fact, we put a lot of money and time into the gathering, and we should. I'm a local church guy. Anyway, the rhythms of Sunday over a lifetime are absolutely formative in all of our lives, and we need to gather. But we put a lot of resources in it. You pay a preacher, you have sound and lights and seats and a building and all the things. We have lots of systems for gathering. But the systems for sending, that looks a little more like a side hustle. You might have one good volunteer who likes that school down there, and that's her thing, and we don't want to discourage that. But we don't really have a system. We don't have a robust system for moving people into the marketplace, moving people into the public square. And so we know that it's hard. We know that it doesn't happen naturally. So finding tools and resources, and Eddie and your team have provided some of those. I've walked around a little bit. I've looked at your stuff. I know y'all are working to do that. We've created toolkits that help you in schools and help you in foster care and human trafficking initiatives and all the things. But finding creating a system for sending, and that system could be a team, a QR code, a table in the foyer. But it has to be championed by you. You have to give your people permission to move out. I know you need preschool workers. I get that. But I'm not serving your preschool ministry. I'm just telling you, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't feel called to do it. I love my kids. I don't love your kids. So we need preschool workers. God bless them. But there's a lot of people. I had a friend. I did his funeral in the end of the summer. He was a mentor of mine in Texas. Made a lot of money before I ever knew him. Made a lot of money. Bought a ranch. All the things. He said, Daryl, they only come to me when they want me to pass out bulletins or give away money. He was talking about the preachers guys. He said, I have built, and he didn't say it like that. He would never have said it like, but he was saying, I've built a business. I manage hundreds of people. I've done complicated things and been pretty successful. Why won't they come and ask me to be a part of something great? What's your sending system? What does that look like for you? And then finally, what evil has died this year because you've been engaged in the community? What darkness has been pushed back? What would happen? Let's just say your community has 50,000 people. Is it possible for a handful of churches that work together in a particular space and see lostness pushed back by 1% this year? 2%, 3%. To see every kid that needs a foster home have one by the end of the next 24 months. By every kid that graduates from high school having good next steps to college or tradescraft or whatever it's going to be to help break the cycle of poverty. You say, is that really our space? Well, it is our space when that single mom can't keep a car running in order to... Listen, those kids are not coming to Vacation Bible School. You understand that? It's just your kids and my kids that are coming to Vacation Bible School, and then a handful of other outliers. When we help kids break the cycle of poverty, we give them opportunities to see more clearly the goodness and grace of God and have opportunities to be a part of what He's doing in this community. So yeah, we care about poverty. You say, well, the social gospel killed the real, killed evangelicalism. No, the social work didn't do that. People with bad theology did that. The Great Commandment is still the Great Commandment. The Great Commission is still the Great Commission. The Great Compassion is still the Great Compassion. The Great Collaboration is still the Great Collaboration. We've put the word great on all those. I get that. But when we step into this space, we start to see evil die in our communities and cultures shift. I was talking to, a friend of mine, and I'll close, the other day, and I said, hey, brother, I've just talked to our mayor. I had lunch with him, or coffee with him. And, when we're friends, and we didn't talk about county business, and we didn't talk about everyone's Wilson. As much as I wanted to talk about everyone's Wilson, we didn't talk about any of that. We just shared our hearts with each other. And I said, hey, do you have any friends? Like, I know you got me, but do you have any friends? So we had that conversation. He said, hey, I've talked to my pastor about that, and I think he's trying to get some of us together. So I reached out to his pastor. I said, hey, just had this. So, again, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't want it to be a big deal, but I'm just saying we've got 3 mayors in our county, the county mayor and 2 city mayors. We got another, the Watertown mayor, but he's a little farther away. But all of them are Jesus people, Christians. And when we begin to build networks of trust, I want you to know that it moves the culture of your community that's more faith forward, and it opens opportunities for gospel advance. Evil can die when we step into what God is already wanting to do in our community. So that when Jesus was praying or teaching His disciples how to pray, He said, may it be on earth as it is in heaven. Now, I don't know what your eschatology looks like. I don't even know what mine looks like, depending on what day it is. I'm not sure. I know He's coming back. I know He's got this. But so I'm not making an eschatological statement here. I'm just saying He is faithful to make it more in your city as it is in heaven when we join His kingdom activity.